What's good, YouTube? I'm Dewan, and I'm back with another packet trace tutorial. In the last video, we went over switch hardening. In part 2, we will be covering how to harden your router. Now, when I mention hardening, that means securing all access to your device. So along with securing your console port access, you should remember that your routers, your switches should be in a locked closet or data center or something of that nature where no one can access it but people who are authorized. Moving forward, I hope you all enjoyed the last video. This live series will be over configuring this RIP network. Like I said, we have site A here and site B here. This is router 1, router 2, switch 1, switch 2, and then here are your PCs. The next thing that I recommend for all of you that are working on getting your CCNA CCNA, make sure you have good notes, good documentation. And the two things I use for this is going to be OneNote. OneNote is awesome. You can keep notebooks. So I have a Cisco notebook, and these are some of the sections that I have. And then in each section, you can add pages to your section. In my Cisco notebook, I have a RIP lab, which we're doing now. In every video, I have a different page for the notes of that video. So if you guys are following along, the first video was switch hardening. This video will be router hardening. And here's my notes for that. And then I'll also use Notepad++. Notepad++ is basically a better version of Notepad. Rather than opening up 20 different notepads for each router or switch, and then you have to basically tab through each one, you can just have tabs up here all in one program. That's Notepad++. Now, onto our lab. If you watched the last video, you'll know that this is R1, R2, SW1, and SW2, representing Site A and Site B. The first thing we're going to do is pull up R1. Now, R2 will have this pretty much the same exact configuration or hardening. The only thing different will be the name. I'm using Packet Tracer 7 for this lab. If you all want to know how to download Packet Tracer 7, I have a link up here with a video that will show you how to do that, how to install it, how to set it up in initial configuration. I also have other videos on packet tracers, but right now we'll get back to this RIP series. Now I have R1 open. When you click on a device, that brings up the console. That will be just like plugging into the console port on an actual router or an actual switch. So we'll just click on this, and that brings us to the CLI. Currently there are no configurations on this router, but we'll verify that. When you first get into a router, you'll see it says router with a greater than sign, and that will let you know that you are in user exec mode. In user exec mode, you can do basic commands like show, IP interface brief. You can't do show run because it's limited access, but you can look at things like the interface. Now, if you really want to get into a device and start getting dirty, you need to get into enable mode or what we call privileged exec mode. So you can do that by typing enable. And currently, we do not have anything keeping us from getting into privileged exec mode. This is the mode where you can actually configure and do some damage on your device. So what we need to do is set up a console password, meaning when you plug into my router, you're going to have to enter a password in order to access it. And then we also need to configure a password for anyone that actually does get into the device. They'll have to enter a password before they can configure or make any changes. So let's get started. First thing we want to do is verify there's no configurations. So I already did a show IP interface brief. None of the ports have configurations, and they're set down whenever you're dealing with a router. Interfaces are automatically down until you bring them up, but we'll discuss that later. What we want to do is a show running configuration and verify that there's no configs on this device. If they are, we'll have to remove them. One of the things you'll see when you do a show run is that the version is 15.1. The host name is router, which is default. There is no service password encryption, which is default. And then we'll go down. Like I said, the interfaces have no configurations. The console line has no configuration. Auxiliary line has no configuration. The VTY lines have no configurations. Now that we verified there's no configurations on this device, let's get into this device and type a host name. Oh man. This translating whatever, I just mistyped, I misprint. And it says translating DSJ whatever to domain server, and then it has the 255.255.255.255. Now what do? I'm pressing enter, it won't do anything. If you hit Control-Shift-6, that aborts that operation. What it's doing is trying to contact a DNS server to say, look up this DNS name, but we don't have a domain name server configured. So what we need to do is go in here to configuration mode. That's where you actually start to or begin to make configurations on the router. So right now we're in privileged exec mode. We're going into global configuration mode, and you do that by typing configure terminal or config T, as many of you may know. So now that we're in the global configuration mode, we need to first do a no IP domain lookup, which tells the device to not do DNS lookups. Otherwise, you could be waiting all day and it gets annoying. Now that we're in here, we have that configured. We'll set a host name. The host name for this device is going to be R1. And as you can see here, the name changes to R1. Next, we need to set a password to go from the user exec mode to the privileged exec mode. You do that by typing enable password, and then the password that we're going to use is going to be never use. And why did we do that? I'm going to explain here right now. So what we're going to do is type exit. Now we're back into user exec mode. We need to get into enable or privileged exec mode. We type en or enable. And now it prompts us for a password. And what we're going to do is type never use. We're back in. Two things about this password. It's not encrypted and it's clear text. So if we do a show or sh run, show running configuration, you'll see this password right here, enable password never use. That's not good. So the password is clear text and not encrypted. So what we need to do is go back in here to configure global configuration mode by typing config T, and then we'll set the new enable secret password. So we'll type enable and then secret. The enable secret password is an MD5 hash password. So the password we'll use for this is going to be Cisco. Now, if I was to type a space after Cisco like this and press enter, that space will be included. You can use letters, numbers, symbols, capital letters, and spaces in your password. So be careful whenever you're typing these passwords not to include a space that's not intended. So we'll hit enable secret Cisco. Now our password is going to be enable secret Cisco when we enter the privileged exec mode. Now we can type exit to go back to privileged exec mode from the global configuration mode, or you can hit Control plus Z on your keyboard, and that will take you back to the privileged exec mode. And then we'll hit exit also to take us back to user exec mode. Now when you enter the enable mode, you got two passwords set. You got your enable password and your enable secret. One of the things to note here, and please remember this, whenever you set your enable secret, it basically null and voids or takes precedence over your enable password, because it's a more secure password. and all that good stuff, but you still want to make sure you have everything configured correctly. So we'll type Cisco, and now if you do a show running configuration, you'll see you have 2 passwords configured. You have your enable secret MD5 password, and then you also have your enable never use password still in clear text. Okay, now that we have that configured, we'll go back into global configuration mode. Now that we're back in global configuration mode and we have our enable secret password configured, whenever you connect to your device, you still don't need a password to enter the device, meaning whenever you connect to your router, you will be prompted to enter a password. So in order to do that, what we do is go into line console 0 or line con 0. The CLI does support short syntax. The more often you use the CLI, you'll get used to the syntax that it accepts. We need to configure a password. The password we will use is going to be password console. Now I entered the password, but it does not go into effect until you type this command, login. That means, okay, there's a password set and I'm enforcing it. Boom, login. Now, since we're configuring our routers right now, initially out the box, and let's say it's on our desk in the office, by default, whenever you connect to your console port, you got 10 minutes before it times out. If you're not doing anything, if you're not configuring the device or looking at commands in the device or checking your configurations, it times out in 10 minutes. But if it's on our desk, we may not want it to time out because let's say we're in a secure location and we're doing a bunch of things and we don't want to have to come back and entering our password and getting back to where we were. So what you can do is what you call exec timeout. And if you type exec hyphen timeout and then question mark, it tells you the syntax for minutes. So if I type, let's say 5 minutes, and then how many seconds. But if you just type 0, 0, that tells it to never time out. Now we will not get timed out of our console connection. Next, I want to show you one more thing. Often when you're configuring your device, you'll get these interrupt messages. So if I go into, let's say, interface gigabit 00, and I do a no shut, and that brings up the interface. As you can see, I'm right here and I'm no longer at the line I was on to configure. That can be really upsetting because you can be in the middle of a long syntax or a long command and it interrupts you, and you'll have to tab or hit enter to get back to where you were, and it just throws you off. There's a way to fix that. We'll go back into the line con 0. Now these messages only happen when you're in the console line. When you're connected to the VTY lines, that won't happen unless you turn on terminal monitor. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're looking for these messages and you're connected on the VTY line, you notice that you're not receiving these messages. What you have to do is go into privilege exec mode and turn on terminal monitor. Boom. And now you will receive those messages when you're in your VTY lines. That was just a quick tip. We can talk about that later. I know this is a little more advanced tip, but I figured we'll throw this in since we're dealing with routers. We'll go back into line con 0 again. And to fix those interrupt messages that we're talking about, so if we just type login, it says synchronize message output. So login synchronous, sorry. Boom. And now those interrupt messages are good to go. If we were to go back to privilege exec mode, we could type exit twice. But what we'll do now is just type Control Z at the same time on your keyboard. If you're using Windows, it takes you all the way back to privilege exec mode. Now we're here. And then we'll type exit to exit the device. Then we're going to go back in And this is what it looks like now when you enter your console port. It's prompting you for a password. The password that's prompting you for is going to be console, and you're right back into user exec mode. And in order to get into privileged exec mode, you'll have to type enable. Then the password is going to be Cisco. And we're back into privileged exec mode. Next, I would like to do the VTY lines. So we go back into global configuration mode, and VTY lines are what you actually use to connect to your device through SSH, Telnet, or something like that remotely. These lines on a router, there's usually about 5 lines. You can check, but usually there are 5 lines, 0 through 4, 0 being the first line, 4 being the last line. So we'll go line, VTY, and if you do a question mark here, it'll tell you exactly how many lines you have. In Packet Tracer, you got 16 lines, but I'm pretty sure, depending on what type of router you're using in real world, it's probably only got about 5 lines. So we'll go 0 through 15 on this device, and now we're in the VTY line, and we'll give it a password of password GoCavs. By default, Telnet is turned on. Telnet uses port 23. That's one of the things you need to keep in mind when you're configuring ACLs and firewalls. The thing about Telnet is that it's not secure and it's clear text. So if you were to hook up Wireshark on your network while someone's connecting remotely to a router, you will be able to see all the traffic that is coming across that line. So we have this configured. We're going to start here with just Telnet, but then later we'll do SSH. So just bear with me for a moment as we go through the lab. We configured the password. Just like on the console line, you had to activate or enforce that password use. So we'll have to hit the login command, meaning implement this password. I want to mention that if you're in a home environment, you may find it okay to hit the no login command, which means you do not need a password to enter this device. But in the real world, never do that. Even in your home life, get used to hitting that login command, enforcing the password usage. I highly recommend that. You know, security is something you should always practice and get used to implementing when you're doing your home labs and in the real world. Just wanted to tell you that. Now, when you enter your device, let's go back. So if we were to enter our console, it just says press return to get started. The problem is if someone connects to this device, how do they know who to contact if there's something wrong with the device? How are you going to prevent somebody from getting into the device if they don't know they're not supposed to be in it? There's a number of reasons why you need what Cisco likes to call a banner message. So we'll go back into this device. We'll hit enter, hit the password console, enable, and then Cisco. Now we're back into privileged exec mode. Let's go into global configuration mode. And what we need to enter is going to be a banner message of the day, or banner motd. There are other types of banners, but for Packet Tracer, the only type of banner that you can use is either a login banner or a banner message of the day. The thing about a banner message of the day is that when you set the banner message of the day, no matter how you connect to the device, whether it's VTY line or a console port or auxiliary port, you will be greeted with your banner message of the day. Now, to configure the banner message of the day, you'll type banner motd, we'll hit the question mark, and it says where C is the delimiting character, meaning that asterisk, do not enter, asterisk, but you can use any character you like. I like to use the caret. So what that basically is saying is that whatever character you start your message with, you have to end your message with. And I'll show you my banner. We start from the caret and we go to end caret. And when I type this in packet tracer and press paste, let's blow that up. You can see banner message of the day, caret, all the way down to caret. And if I press enter, we're back at global configuration. But if I exit the device, you get prompted with the banner message of the day. We'll hit console to get out of here. Enable Cisco. Now, there is no clear screen when you're dealing with the CLI. You'll just have to type enter if you want to basically get a clear screen. So we'll enter and we're back down here. The next thing we need to do, since we're dealing with a router, normally we would be pretty much done hardening our switch, but there's another line that Cisco recommends that you secure. It doesn't talk much about it, but it's the auxiliary line on your routers. Basically what that line is you take a cable, you plug it into a modem, and then someone remotely can dial into your routers through a phone line. Basically, that's what it is. So all we do is go line, auxiliary. There's only one line, so we'll go 0. Then we'll set the password to go calves. And then we'll tell it login. And that's done. Now, if we do a show run, Control Z to go back to previous exec mode, do a show run. You can see we have our enable secret, the host name. We have our enable password, clear text. And then we have our banner. Then we go down and you'll see we have our line con configured. Password is clear text. That's a problem. Auxiliary line is go calves, clear text. Your VTY lines, password is configured with go calves, and that's clear text. We do not want our passwords clear text. That means that anyone that gets access to our device will be able to do a show run or Wireshark our device. And if we're going through Telnet, and they can see all our passwords configured on our device. So what we want to do is go in here to config T. And in order to encrypt these passwords on your Cisco device, you will type service password encryption. And now, if we do a show run a configuration, you will see your passwords now have a type 7 encryption. Boom. These passwords are not the most secure. There are password crackers online that people use to crack these passwords. So when you're using real world equipment, it's recommended to use Radius or TACAX to secure your passwords in your devices. Good enough. We go back into global configuration mode. Now that we're back in the global configuration mode, we basically have our device hardened, but we still have a problem. And that problem is Telnet. Telnet, like I said, uses port 23 and it operates clear text and it's not secure. There is a better option when you're connecting to your device remotely, and that's SSH. SSH uses port 22. These are things that you have to remember. I often keep documentation of different port numbers by my desk just in case I'm working on anything and I may have to reference that material. It makes my day a lot simpler. But anyway, SSH or secure shell is a cryptographic network protocol used for operating over unsecured networks. It encrypts your data whenever you're on like the internet, basically. What we're going to do next is configure SSH. Now, in order to configure SSH, there's a couple things you need to do. The first being name your device, of course. Then you need to configure an IP domain name. The IP domain name will be whatever your domain name that you're accessing. So for this purpose, we'll give it ohiostate.local. This name combined with the host name of the device will equal the fully qualified domain name that's used for the encryption keys when you're using SSH. Boom. So we have that configured. Next, we need to configure a username for this device. So the username we'll use is going to be username Dwan. And then when you're setting your username, you have to give it a privilege level. The privilege level goes from 0 through 15. 0 just means that you can connect to the device, but you can't do much. 15 means that you go straight into enable mode. So rather than going into user exec mode, you actually can get into enable mode just by logging into the device. I'll give myself privilege 15, and then you have more options after privilege 15. You have to configure it to just use a password or a secret password. If you type password here, next you have to either tell it the password that you want to use. If you put 0, it's an unencrypted password that you'll enter, like the word Cisco or something like that. But if you put the number 7, so if we put number 7 here, you'll have to enter a hidden password string. So whatever your enable secret was or something like that, you'll have to enter that there because it'll be able to read it. But what we're going to use is a basic secret password of Cisco. Now this matches my enable secret password. In the real world, you don't want to do that, but for this lab purpose, we'll keep it as that. Boom, we have that configured. So we have the domain name configured, we have a username configured. The next thing we want to do is create the crypto key. Key generate RSA modulus. This is the actual key that is created whenever you're using SSH. Now you want to make sure that you set this for the highest bits possible, and you can always, it tells you how many bits that you can actually configure. We're going to use 2048. Boom. And now these will be the keys that are generated whenever you form a SSH connection. We have that portion done. If we go back to privilege exec mode and do a show IP SSH, you can see we're running version 1.99, and the authentication timeout is 120 seconds, and the authentication retry is 3 attempts. Those are the defaults, but what you want to run is SSH version 2. So we'll go back into global configuration mode, and we'll tell this IP SSH version 2. And now when we go back, can't type, and do a show IP SSH, it says version 2, but your authentication timeout is still 120 seconds, and your authentication retries is still 3 attempts. We'll go back into global configuration mode, and so whenever you connect to this device, you're still accepting Telnet. What we need to do is tell this device to only accept SSH and not Telnet. So we'll go back into line VTY 0 through 15, and we're going to tell this to transport input SSH, and that means to only accept SSH. You can tell it to accept all the protocols, none of the protocols, SSH or Telnet, but what we're going to do, like I said, was just SSH. Now the last thing we need to do is go into the VTY line and tell it to log in using that local username that we just created. So we'll tell it login local. Now whenever someone connects to the VTY line, they will be prompted to use that username of Dwayne with the password of Cisco. So if we do a show run on our device, you can see that service password encryption is on. The host name of R1 is configured. The enable secret has been configured. There is an enable password configured, but because of service password encryption being turned on, it is now an encrypted password. Next, you'll see that we're using the username of Dewan, privilege level 15 with the secret password of Cisco. You can't see it because it's the secret option. And then we're using SSH version 2 on this device. We told it no IP domain lookup, meaning do not look up DNS names. And then we set this device IP domain name to ohiostate.local, which SSH needs to work on the device. We have a banner configured with the banner message of the day. our line console ports. We set a password on those. We turned on login synchronous, and we force you to authenticate to this device whenever you connect to that router. The line auxiliary, we set a password and also enforce you to log in this device if you're going to use the auxiliary lines. Lastly, on our VTY lines, we configured a password, but even though there's a password configured, we told it to log in with that local username of Dewan, password Cisco, and then we told this device to only accept remote SSH connections whenever someone is coming across the VTY line. Now the last thing we need to do on this device is to save these configs. Normally, I would do a write mem, meaning write memory, but for CCNA purposes, you need to know how to copy running configuration to your startup configuration. Press enter. It says destination file name. Just press enter. And that's how you save your configurations in this lab and on your CCNA. We have this device hardened. Now, we do not have IP addresses to test out SSH and all that good stuff, but that's coming in a future video. The next video will be over VLANs. We'll get all those configured. And then after that, we'll start configuring our sub interfaces on our router. Now, I'm about to configure router 2, but before I do, I want to wrap up this video. And then at the end, you guys can watch the sped up version of the steps that I use to configure router 2, which will be the same as this. The only thing changes is the host name. I thank you all for viewing, and I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you got questions, hit me up. Share this video, like this video, hit it with a thumbs up, and please feel free to subscribe. I appreciate all of your support. Peace.